We try to steal time at training, whether it's before or after training, throughout training, to connect with our players. That experience that the player's going to have in that season comes down to the coach. The coach will have the number one contributing factor. If you're excited as a coach that training could be cancelled, then we've got a problem with the culture. How do you know if you've got something cool going on in your team when you've got like 3 or 4 players just going, bang, I know what you're going to talk about. If you're willing to do the work and you're willing to be challenged and you're curious, then pretty much anything else is possible.
Welcome to Coaching Culture, the podcast about cultivating culture and leadership. I'm Ben Herring and I've been loving this side of the game for bloody ages. Today's guest is Sean Graham, Director of Rugby for the last 11 years at the legendary St Joseph's Nudgee College in Brisbane, the powerhouse school for over 100 years, which has had 46 premierships and one of the leading providers of wallabies nationwide. Most recently, they've just completed the 4P. 2025 was the most points scored by a GPS school in a season. Sean is also founder and director of the epic Youth Rugby Coaches Forum, which is one of the very best organised and resourced coaching forums in the world. In a previous life, he organised music festivals where he probably developed this amazing ability to read the heartbeat of any group of people he's with. Sean Graham, welcome to the Coaching Culture podcast.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
What a pleasure. And the first question that I'm going to ask you is, how do you define culture?
Yeah, wow, I'm just trying to digest that introduction. That was... I'm flattered.
I should caveat that the festival started by your own love of actually playing in the band, right? And by organising the festival, you got front stage, right?
Yeah, look, in a roundabout way, I think that was part of the motive. Look, bringing people together. Let's stick with that narrative. Look, let's talk about culture. Wow, it's a huge word, isn't it? For some reason, my mind keeps going down this path of care and connection. And I don't know if it's because they both start with C and it lines up nicely with the word culture, but I think about care. Like if you genuinely care about the community that you're in, your club, your school, your province, your country, if you've got genuine care, then I feel like people go above and beyond in their roles. And that's not just the players, like that's coaches, administrators, support staff, and that's really in any environment, not just obviously my world's a schoolboy rugby program. And if I'm around people that have genuine care for where they are, that's a real good start. The other part there is connection. Like we've had this big push this year around being absolutely ruthless in our pursuit for connection, relentless connectors we talk about. So we try to steal time at training, whether it's before or after training, throughout training, to connect with our players and also connect with our staff too. And that connection piece, if you establish really strong relationships, there's trust there, there's respect there. And again, genuinely, I feel like that puts you in good stead to having a really cool environment or culture, if we want to use that word.
Yeah, I love that phrase, mate. Like when there's genuine care, people go above and beyond their roles. Like what have you got any examples of where that's played out with your crew? People going above and beyond just what's required?
Well, like an easy one to think about is like when people are turning up for training. So if you've got coaches that are down there early because they're keen to just catch up, have a chat, get things set up, talk more about the session, that's a good sign, isn't it? That's a really good marker. Even with players, like obviously our environment, we predominantly train after school. If you've got kids that are getting changed, having a quick bite to eat and getting down to the training field early, intentionally early, because they just want to get down there because they're excited about practice, well, again, that's a pretty good sign that you've created something that people want to be a part of.
How do you get that? Has it always been there, or have you had to work on that aspect?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the connection piece, when I do surveys and sort of reviews with players at the end of the season, something that I've found over the years is that the one consistent that players always talk about is relationships. And, you hear this stuff all the time, don't you, around players want to know how much you care before they care how much you know, and all these things around the relationship, and they want to feel like they're a part of something. So if a player feels like they belong, like genuinely feels like they belong, they're in a really safe environment, then that's when real growth can happen, I believe. So they've got to feel like there's an environment that they want to be a part of. And it's, as I said, it's safe and
And that's largely to do with the coaches, isn't it? Coaches are the first leaders of that. Like, do you put it down to that, or because you run the bigger program? How many teams do you have at St. Joseph? You've got an absolute truckload of players and teams, right?
Yeah. So this year we had 814 players across 39 teams. If you do the numbers on that, we could have more than 39 teams. The challenge is obviously getting fixtures each week. So we kind of cap the teams at about 39 each year, 39 to 40 teams we put out each year. And I do believe it starts with the coach. Like, the biggest influence a player you can have on a player's experience is the coach and the influence of the coach. There's no doubt about it. So you can get external coaches or specialist coaches coming in and doing a session here and there. As the director, I can come in and do a one-off session or some spot coaching. But ultimately, that experience that the player is going to have in that season comes down to the coach. The coach will have the number one contributing factor to that experience of the athlete. I strongly believe that. And like, the boys will say, oh, I really loved the team and I loved playing with my mates. There was a really good feel amongst the group, but the coach is responsible for that. He's responsible for bringing that team together and creating that environment. And so for me, in my role, I've got nearly 100 coaches that I employ in the program. So how do I make sure I get to the players? It's often through the coaches. So how am I supporting the coaches to make sure that they're providing the best possible experience for their players?
Mate, it's quite refreshing to hear, because it puts a lot of onus on the coach, isn't it? Sometimes, and particularly in schoolboy stuff and schoolgirl, is some of your coaches no doubt will be required to. So how do you instill that sort of care that you talk about, that a coach that's having to do a role to fill up a requirement, how do you get them to care so much that they are responsible for that feeling amongst the team and that experience the players are having?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think firstly, you do inherit some staff, and then also the ones that you choose, you've got to be really selective and you've got to be ruthless in your appointment of coaches. I believe you've got to know that I look for two things. I look for work ethic, and then so that's a big one. And then I look for young people and coaches that have a growth mindset. So if you're willing to do the work and you're willing to be challenged and you're curious, then pretty much anything else is possible, I think. So, to go back to your question around that care, so the first thing that's critical, I believe, is your coach appointment. So who's coaching who? Some coaches are suited for different age groups, and then who are they coaching with? So we have 2 coaches on every team. So who they partner up with is really important. And, you can look at any number of things. Obviously, you might look at forward specialist, back specialist, good cop, bad cop, if you want to use those terms. Yeah, and some people are just better suited for working with, like, our program runs from our under 11s through to our opens who are 18. So there's a bit of diversity in those age groups. And then there's an accountability piece. So you can't leave things for chance as a director like me in the program. If I can sense that something's not right, there's no point in me waiting till the end of the season, sitting down with coaches, having a review and talking about something that I knew was a problem, right from the start. So you've got to be comfortable, leaning into some of those uncomfortable conversations. And yeah, because at the end of the day, if you can forecast something's not going to be right, well, you've got the potential to intervene, then you have to. And that's what I think I've done over the years, is been really present. So being really present around training sessions in particular, and just reading the room. So listening to the players. Like, the players know. If it's a good environment, you just ask them little questions. A question that I love to ask my players is, are you excited about training this afternoon? And I think there's a little bit in that question. Like,
yeah,
if you're excited, I think it's not just because, you talk about, you want training to be fun and engaging, and, the players want to feel like the coach cares, and, they care about you as a person, not just a player, and all those things. But if you just ask that one question, are you excited about training? Oh yeah, I can't wait. I'm pumped for training this afternoon. It's like, yep, that team is sweet. If the coach and the team sort of like not that pumped and it's training's turning into a bit of a grind, a bit of a punish, then that's where you sort of need to start asking some questions and looking a little bit deeper as to what's going on.
Because that rubs off, doesn't it? That if you're asking a coach, you're excited about training this afternoon, and the answer's, oh, yeah, no, yeah, we'll get through it, or something to that effect. Because the coach is the top of the waterfall, right? That sentiment, that feeling, that level of almost care around the enjoyment washes down over the entire team underneath, right?
100%. Absolutely. Like, you spoke about like the culture piece and how do you know if it's working, if you want to use that word, or if things are going well. I reckon, like, if you think about this, I've seen in some environments where it starts raining, for example, in the afternoon, just before training, and coaches are going, training might be off this afternoon. You think, if you're excited as a coach that training could be cancelled, then we've got a problem with the culture. Whereas if you've got a team around you where it's like, they're coming in to me going, hey, Sean, do you reckon they're going to close the fields this afternoon? What do you reckon we can do? And what are our options here?
Yeah. It's a very different tone, isn't it?
Massively. Yeah. Like it's can do, like, yeah. I was thinking about another example with this, in our other programs where, like as an example, and you sort of get it with the school stuff. Like, so the first few weeks of a term, for example, you're into your preseason and there might be like a few disruptions, like there's public holidays, parent teacher interviews. And so the easy option with that is to go, you know what, it's just going to be a bit messy. Let's just get the preseason going in week 2 or 3. Let's just leave week 1. It's a bit of a mess. Week 2, sort of, we'll get going in week 3. That's cool, but that's a shortcut. That's the easy option. If you want to establish standards and about a culture of like, we are not cutting corners, like, that's a bit of a mantra of ours. Like, we talk a lot about like, we do the work, we don't cut corners, and that's got to come from the top down. So for me, I'm looking at opportunities on when we can train. Now, that may mean that they're training at different times, a morning instead of an afternoon, but I look at that as an opportunity where my opposition potentially it hasn't got going yet, and we might be 2 or 3 sessions ahead because we've found opportunities to train.
Love that, mate. It's a mindset, isn't it? Like, yeah. It's that growth mindset you talked about that you were looking for, along with the work ethic, that are 2 big drivers for you. But you want that in your coaches, right? Like searching for that. How can we do it better with this constraint?
Yeah, looking for and not, it can't be, it's got to be genuine too. Like people can pretend, and look, I know there's going to be times, like people are juggling lots in their life. And I understand. The other thing I've got to be is realistic. When I've got a program of nearly 100 coaches, I've got some coaches who are ex-professional coaches where this is sort of their job. They might teach a little bit, but the rugby coaching is a big part of what they do. And then I've also got like senior members of staff at the school who have a lot going on in their life, and rugby coaching is a small part of that. So I can't have the same expectations. So I need to focus on the things that I guess you might call the non-negotiables. So what do I just demand from any coach? And I think that comes back to their care. Again, going back to that word, like they've got to care still, even if they, I don't expect them to have like this crazy session plan where, every minute of their session's planned out, but they've got to have some level of care. Like they've got to be there on time. The boys have got to know that they are still committed to this role as the coach. And the boys will suss that out straight away. They'll know if the teacher or the coach or whoever it is not really in it. Boys and girls, everyone can sense that. They can see it in your body language. They can see it in the way you're interacting with the players. Do you care and are you connecting? And then also like just the engagement factor. I can see it. I can walk past training. What's the engagement look like? The other stuff I don't even like, we can talk about the X's and O's and, like what does training look like? But if we're getting down to my 7th and 8th, 15, like what are those boys and what does that experience look like for them? Like, don't get me wrong, those boys still love their rugby. They still want an experience that they can get excited for. But it may not be that it's going to be as I mentioned, like the routine and the structure of some of the other sessions, but certainly there's that care there and there's the investment and engagement.
Have you had any misses on that? Like, have you had, so you talked about when you make these appointments and if you get it wrong, you shift people straight away. What does getting it wrong look like? It's when you get coaches missing the mark. With 100 coaches, you're going to miss sometimes, right? Like, what does it look like? You're putting coaches with incorrect teams where they're doing too much X's and O's and not connecting. What does that look like when it goes not to plan?
Yeah, I'm just thinking back. So like one of my early years, I had a coach, put him on an A team, external coach, and he had had some success in some of the previous teams that he had coached, but in our environment, he was out of his depth from a technical and tactical point of view. And so this was sort of a different one, actually, where that is a factor as well. Don't get me wrong. Like, you've got to know your stuff. And again, the boys know if you're a bit out of your depth with an A team. So that was a slightly different one where I could just sense that probably didn't have the technical knowledge, but probably more so that then he struggled with the connection because he was sort of bluffing his way through it. And honestly, I didn't make it uncomfortable, but I was just those constant conversations and that accountability piece. And ultimately, he made the decision for me and just said, look, mate, I know that I can't provide the experience that you're wanting for your boys, and I'll move on, which was cool. Some of the other ones, and this is the challenging one, we probably rotate through about 20% of our coaches each year. So we have, as I mentioned, like, nearly 100 coaches, and 20-30% of them are young old boys. So they graduate from school, they're doing uni or whatever, and they want to stay involved in the program, so they might coach for a year or two. And it's really hard to know what those boys are going to be like, because it's not the best rugby player who's going to be the best coach, because often the top end players probably don't have the time to commit. So you kind of take a bit of a gamble on these guys. And obviously it's as well, like, they're out of school, so it's around their commitment and what does their life look like outside of school. But yeah, when they're not able to fulfill their roles, it's a challenge, because our parents have a certain expectation for the coaches, but what they don't understand is when I'm at my 80th or 90th coach, I can't be too picky, because realistically, like, you think about it, I've got to find someone who's available to get to Nudgee for 2 afternoons a week at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So that rules out 99% of the population. So it is a challenge. So sometimes I've just got to work with what I've got. And I reckon I've got good bang for my buck in just making even the coaches feel like they're really valued, and just supporting them as much as I can throughout their journey. So it's an ongoing support where, obviously I'm trying to fill them with confidence in their role, provide them with the support they need, and just take any of that external pressure off them. They don't have to really do any administration, because we have age coordinators on each of our age groups. So they're not directly communicating with players or parents. We have age coordinators that do that. So they just have to focus on getting their training sessions right and getting their game day right.
Yeah. When you talk about the parents' expectations, is that shifted over time? You've been in that role a long time. What's a modern rugby player's parental expectations at that level? Is it getting more demanding? Because, well, I'm certainly seeing there's a pathway now to be a professional rugby player. So it can be treated like a subject, especially at strong rugby schools like yours. Is that becoming like a more passionate following from parents? And where do you see that leading?
Yeah, like, it's a good question. I wonder if a year 8 maths teacher is as scrutinised as a 13A rugby coach, or if there's as many questions around selection and things like that. Look, my parent body is excellent. And again, I feel like in these roles, you can, if you're really proactive and over communicate and don't leave too many grey areas out there, people are generally pretty good. Like,
I love that word, over communicate to parents, and because parents are stakeholders essentially in the program, aren't they?
Yeah, I've been leaning into this space a lot in recent years. People talk about, how are you going to manage your parents? I sort of think, look, I don't know if that's the right word. I think it's how are you collaborating and working alongside your parents, because they are a key pillar in this relationship with coach, player, and parent. And if we're not working together, then we can't maximize potential. So like a perfect example is we can do a lot of really good work at training, and there could be really good conversations, really specific feedback that you're providing a player. It could be a selection thing. They've moved up or down in a week. And if Johnny jumps in the car and the conversation he has with mum or dad on the way home is not aligned with what the coach's messaging is, then you're kind of back to square one. And the player can get some really mixed messages. So as an example, something that we've tried this year is, if I've caught up with a player, for example, at lunch and had a difficult conversation around selections and, look, mate, unfortunately, you're going to be moving down to the Bs for whatever reason, I'll follow that up with an email or a phone call to the parent. Not always, but I know if I can forecast that this potentially is not going to be crystal clear for everybody in this partnership, then I'll get on the front foot and just make sure that, hey, just letting you know, this is the conversation that we had. These are the points that we spoke about. If you could help me as a coach by reinforcing this to Johnny when he's home tonight, that's going to be really beneficial for his development. Because at the end of the day, I don't think anyone doubts that a parent doesn't have the best interests of their son or daughter. Like that they want what's best, but sometimes they just probably don't have the resources to provide their son or daughter with, the messaging that is going to actually support them.
Yeah, and it's fascinating too because most players, unless you're playing in the for you fellas, it would be the 8th team, but even there, everyone wants to get better. Right? Like it's one of those, sport is one of those things where people want to get better. They want to play better because it's more fun, score more tries, have a better time. So all players do want feedback, whatever level they're playing. Is that something you agree with?
Absolutely. Like if you do any sort of feedback, review at the end of a season, one of the common topics or suggestions that the players would say is, I would have loved more individual feedback. Everyone wants individual feedback. And that again there's an art in that. Like that's, you got to be realistic about how much time a coach has in providing feedback, but also like, what does that actually look like? So something I'll share that I've done over the years, which has worked for me, is, so when I do a pre-game talk on a Saturday, I don't really do much talking. So what I do is a couple of minutes before warm-up, we'll all just take a knee and everyone will just share one or two things that they're focused on for the game. Now, the reason why I like doing it that way is because it gives me some confidence, or maybe not so much, around, what sort of headspace the player's in. And it also gives me a little bit of feedback on how much I have coached this player in the week leading into that game. If they're a little bit vague and sort of off the mark, it's a reminder for me that I've potentially missed the mark on individually coaching this player. So it's a nice little a weekly sort of checkpoint where you can reflect on your own coaching in the. So if the boys are locked in, and then the other part of it I like is that there's a bit of accountability for the rest of the team. And then obviously as the coach, you can just touch on a couple of those points that the players have shared, and then you're ready to go. And also everyone knows, all the boys are then contributing a little bit. There's a little bit of opportunity for leadership there, and then they're contributing to the game. And that's the beauty of rugby, isn't it? Like everyone has a key role to play to get the outcome.
Mate, I love what you're saying there about hearing what your players say, and then if they just bang back with the things that you've talked about during the week, it means it's sunk in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably the worst thing for a coach is if you've been thinking about something or trying to get something across, and then they don't even mention it. Clearly your delivery or something around it sinking in is missing. So that's a lovely weekly check-in point just before a game.
Yeah. And I think like most coaches would agree that, you're constantly talking to your game drivers. You're constantly talking to sometimes the bottom end of your team, really trying to get them up. Sometimes I reckon we sometimes miss maybe the middle or our real top end talent. Like if you've got a gun finisher, how are we making our great players excellent? And that's a nice little, checkpoint where you remind yourself. And they're really specific things. It might be you've got a right winger, keeps carrying the ball in his left mitt, and you've been telling him, hey, let's get that ball to the right mitt, keep your bumper hand up. Like little things like that where you've done a bit that week. And if he mentions that, you think brilliant. And then, he might then touch on, his positional play, or we've spoken about they've got a left footer in the team, little things like that where it's really specific. And you know what? Sometimes it's not that specific for some players because you don't want them to be overthinking things. Like you're a bit like you when you were playing, Benny. I don't know if you would have just liked to run around and just smack people.
I remember one of my favourite quotes a young coach at school said to me came up to me quietly in the locker room and just said, everywhere, and walked off. Yeah. And I went, and it just had free license to do it. I loved it. I just thought it was the best one-word thing. Another aspect, mate, which you mentioned, and I love your thoughts on it, is the taking the knee. You said you get the boys together or the players together in a circle and you take a knee. And you have this conversation, this little checkpoint. And there's something about that, which I personally think is quite a powerful thing about dropping the level. And I think in school age group, it's a good one because I find when you're talking to a group of, 20-odd 15-year-olds, the distraction levels are immense, right? Like a bird flies overhead and half the kids at the back go, there we go. But when you drop it down onto a knee, for me, there's this real cool coaching thing around, just draws in a lot of focus and all eyes are on you. You don't have to worry about how you're standing, you're lower. Do you have anything? Do you kneel for a reason?
Yeah, I don't know. I like that. And I'm certainly on the knee as well. Like that's key. Like you're down at their level. Like I wouldn't have the boys on a knee and then I'd be standing.
No.
So it's all about, leveling out and everyone's got a role to play to contribute. Like I think, a captivating attention, like that is so important. You're right. Like I believe when we talk about how have boys changed or has the way that we need to train changed, like that we could unpack that a little bit because it is so important what your messaging and how much you can keep your players captivated and engaged for is not that long. Even the ones, mate, that are so locked in and are like, if you start blabbering, and again, I think I'm pretty good at reading the room. If I know I'm starting to talk for too long, I'll look at their eyes. And if there's a bit of side eye action going on, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to call these guys out on it because this is on me. I've missed the mark. Yeah. I'm not going to say, hey, boys, come on, focus on me. It's not about me. I'm talking too much for too long. I've got to move on.
And this is an interesting point for school-age coaching because predominantly a lot of the coaches of school-age coaching are teachers. And it's a very different thing coming out of the classroom setting where there's a different way of doing things. What's the difference for you from teaching in a classroom setting to then coaching the game of rugby particularly? And what potentially is something that those coaches have to separate themselves out?
Yeah, that's an interesting one because I teach PE now and I teach in our junior school, so it's all prac. So for me, like I'm not really in the classroom, I'm on the field. So I actually do lots of things which overlap my coaching world and my teaching world. Yeah, like there's like I trial things in my PE class or vice versa. So look, I think something that you've got to acknowledge as a coach is, particularly in the schoolboy setting, is the boys have been in class all day. And for some of them, like this is their one part of the day that they really look forward to. So that's something that you need to consider is if they've been spoken to, sat down all day, when they get to you, what are they going to be excited about when they first come to your training session? So we put a lot of thought into how we start training sessions because, you so often, again, the coach loves the control and that could be the same control that they like. Actually, that might be something. It's the control, like probably letting go a little bit more, allowing players to lead, being vulnerable as a coach. I think you probably have a little bit more freedom as a coach to coach in chaos than maybe you're allowed as a teacher in a classroom. And obviously there's a lot of research going into that. Like, what is a productive classroom? Is a productive classroom full of kids sitting down quiet behind a desk? Like, how much learning's actually going on in that environment? Like, you talk about what everyone's leaning into a little bit more in the world of sport is, that chaotic environment, which is really ugly, lots of errors going on. Could we learn something from that in the classroom? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think so.
Well, I have this little theory about the difference between teaching and coaching, and I could be way off the mark, mate, or on this, but there's a kind of concept like when you're teaching, say, maths, for example, you've got a syllabus. Here's the book, And anyone can teach maths in theory. You just go through the book. Righto, students, go through pages 1 to 6. Do that. And you're essentially teaching the content. But where it separates for me is when you're out there coaching, the difference is you're coaching that person, the content, and there's the person in between. Whereas sometimes, and you see it in relieving teachers, they're just teaching, righto, page 1 to 6, anyone can do it. But we all know there's a difference in teachers. And the better teachers are the ones that are almost coaching the person first, the content, rather than direct teach the content. They're coaching the person, the content. And in order to coach a person the content, you got to have that little bit of connection, that little bit of care with them first, being able to read them in terms of, are they the sort of person that I need to be harsh with, or do I have to be softer? Do I have to take that a little bit slower, or do I need to speed them up? And when you've been around a long time, good coaches can get that read really quick and just go, this person requires a stern word from the start, and then they'll be able to be taught the content. And I feel like it's a cool one for teachers to realize, because students have been in class all day, probably spoken to all day, and about largely probably the subjects they don't really care about. But so too, sometimes teachers have been all day talking to younger people, just tired about like trying to control a classroom, right? So it's a shift that they have to make for themselves, and also for the benefit of the players that now coach. And you have to make a big separation point. Now I'm a coach over a teacher first. That's my little theory on it, mate. I don't know if it stands up any sort of academic rigor. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, the key there is, the connection. Like, you've got to understand who's in front of you. I think that's the same for a coaching a team or being in a classroom. And you're right, as a relief teacher, it's very difficult because you don't know what's in front of you. So you're not really teaching. You're setting work. And that can be the same with coaches. You think about this, like, you can go through a whole season and go to training session and go through drills, and you're present at a training, and you're gonna get a little bit better, but you may not necessarily actually be coached. Like, and that's another thing that I talk to my coaches about. Are we coaching the individual? Like, how much feedback are we giving individual players? This is crazy. I had this beautiful lady who's head of a department at the school, and she did this project into the rugby program at Nudgee because she wanted to see how she could kind of use some of the strategies that we were using in the rugby program and apply them in the classroom. And one of the big things was feedback. So what she did was she sat in on a heap of my feedback and feed forward, she would call it. And she was talking. So I said to her, okay, sit in on a couple of my training sessions. And what I want you to do is have a tally of every player at training. And I want you to put a little tally next to when I've given a player individual feedback throughout the session. And that could be, and then also make sure that and then we sort of had a little bit of a grid where it was like error correction or reinforcement of like a positive example, or it might have just been encouragement, whatever it was. And then she would show me at the end of the session. It was really cool. I really encourage coaches to do it. Like, if you've got an injured player, you could use them, and just to see how much you're communicating with certain players more than others. And it's a good little, kind of like what I was saying before around that kind of checkpoint. You know, you don't want to get to the end of the season and realize, geez, I've actually neglected a couple of players in my team because I thought they were fine. Like, they're always doing the right thing, but they still want to be coached. So yeah, that was a cool little project. And she actually did a heap of things that season. She actually ended up moving. She got a promotion at another school, so she never finished the project, which she promises me she's going to come back once and do it. But she was literally coming to every meeting I had, every training session, and really unpacking like what was some of the things that we were doing and it was all around feedback. She thought it was around like real specific feedback from coaches to fast track their progression.
Yeah. Well, what's the phrase? I love the phrase feedback and feed forward. What's the feed forward aspect of that pertaining to?
Yeah, like, I think it's kind of like almost forecasting or predicting potentially what's going to happen in a drill. And the line of questioning with all of that as well, I think, is really important. Like, how you ask questions and then and then how good you are at listening and then waiting for responses and all of that. Like she was really interested in that side of things. Like the feed forward, I think, was all around like I was drawing the responses, or the coaches were drawing their responses out of the players rather than you hand feeding it to them.
Yes.
So like I use a phrase in my coaching. I'll say things, I'll start talking and then I'll stop and I'll say, what am I about to say?
Good.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'll be talking, what do you reckon I'm about to talk about now? And when you know, and you talk about how do you know if you've got something cool going on in your team, when you've got like 3 or 4 players just going, bang, I know what you're going to talk about. You're going to say we missed that inside clean, or we should have been chest down on that wide ruck, or we needed to work harder to get into, like bang, bang, bang. It's like when they're on, when they're locked in and everyone's sort of singing from the same hymn sheet, that's cool.
I guess it's a cool one, that feed forward, because just like feedback, you want it to be like, I take a little one around like 5 positive feedbacks to 1 negative is a nice sort of balance for me. But it would be a nice one feeding forward too, because it would be easy to get into the trap of, look, what would happen if we did that, and it to be the negative answer that you're searching for. But like feedback, you want the feeding forward to often be positive as well. He's done that. What do you think that allows? Allows us to have space on the outside where we can score tries. Yeah, absolutely right. So the work he did here is going to lead to that positive outcome for us over there. Great work.
Yeah. What is success going to look like in this game? What are we hoping to achieve? What are we hoping to achieve? What do you reckon we could really focus on?
Mate, that's a really cool concept. I think it's a cool one for coaches because I know we started with a bit of 5-to-1 ratio, and just raising that's the ratio we want to do as a coaching group. And when you're actually got a target like that and you're aware of it, you actually sometimes go, actually, I'm not actually as positive as I thought I was when someone's scoring me. And likewise, when you got someone following you around, like noting down which players you've given feedback to and whatnot, it's a great reflective practice as a coach, isn't it?
And it's not that far-fetched. Like, I know sometimes we're a bit unrealistic for a coach who's coaching schoolboy rugby, but like, honestly, that is an achievable task. You could do it any training session, and you don't even have to do it for the whole session, but you could do it over a week. But, everyone's got an injured player or a co-coach or someone that they can task that with, and you could do it on an iPad or a notepad, whatever. And you don't have to share it with anyone. It could just be for you, or you're completely transparent and you're telling the boys, hey, this is what I'm doing because I'm trying to get better as a coach. I want to make sure I'm providing all of you with feedback. Like, how cool is that?
I tell you, the other one where that would be awesome for a lot of coaches is getting an injured player or whatnot to just analyze you as the coach on a sideline on a Saturday and your tone and your language that you use. Because with the emotional aspect of game day, I think a lot of coaches become something they're actually not and act and say things which isn't probably in congruence with who they actually are as a person and what they'd want to be. And they don't even realize, like, the language, some of the expletives, the way they talk to referees, or how they deal with mistakes or drop passes, the reactions, positive, negative. What's the feedback? Is things got a negative lean on a Saturday? That'd be a fascinating one too.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. And getting a player to do it, like, wow, like that's because you think, oh, geez, do we really want a player to do it? Well, they see it anyway. Like, you've got an injured player, like, on the sideline, they can sense you. They can sense your energy. So put yourself out there and go, you know what? You can fully critique me. And then you can,
Wouldn't it be amazing, mate? Like, what a level of trust and vulnerability for a coach, coaching under 14 side, and you've asked the injured player, can you just monitor my behavior and let me know how many positive to negative phrases I yell out throughout a game?
I think you put a framework around that, particularly the younger they are. So it's not, so they have to take sort of any of their own, thoughts or feelings on it so they don't feel too uncomfortable. It's just like a tick and flick, and you set up the framework, or you set it up in partnership with them. Something around the feedback, and something that we speak a lot about is, I reckon we can be really detailed in our error correction feedback at training, but we skim over positive examples that we're looking for. So as an example, we'll be like we'll give, mate, you've got to get your hands up, like with that pass, you keep dropping it, or whatever it is. But then if it's a good pass, nice work, rather than, I loved how you really reached for that ball. You went back towards the ball. You were really square on your first movements. Like that was exactly what we're looking for. So I reckon we can be really deliberate and get really good return on being a bit more specific with praising good examples at training.
Yeah, there is definitely a coaching tendency to really burrow into the negative aspects, isn't there? And
yeah,
so when someone does something well, it's because they didn't do any of the wrong things. So
yes,
I
yeah.
won't
What does
say
good
anything.
actually look like? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but there's a lot of psychology around that. Like the more you praise the behavior you want to see, you're more likely to get the behavior you want, which is massively understated. And I think I often have this conversation with my wife. My child comes home, and we had a great example a while back where they said, I got 98% in my maths test today, Mum. And her first response was, "Oh, what was the 2% you got wrong?" And then we had the chat afterwards, like, you got 98%. That's
Yeah.
outstanding. She's like, I know. Why did I go to that? Like, just instinctively went to.
It's human nature. Like if I go, we do like end of season like reviews, and literally every single director in our office does exactly the same thing. As soon as you start flicking through, because it'll put it all on a spreadsheet, you skim over anything that's 5 out of 5, 4 out of 5, but anything that scores negatively, your attention directly goes straight to that score and the comments around that. Isn't it just terrible that that's just what we're doing? And you think, we're doing that you imagine when you're having a conversation with a player and you've just tried to fill their cup, but you've also, had some sort of feedback that's potentially a little bit negative. That's all they're hearing.
Well, it's really interesting when you do those sort of grids and graphs of like everyone giving a 5 to 4, 3, 2, 1. You've almost got to sometimes, unless there's a truckload of 1s or 5s, if there's just a couple, you've almost got to remove them and say that's just the outliers. That's someone who's hardcore loves rugby regardless of whoever's coaching, or the person who gives it 1 they're going to give you a 1 anyway because they're not into it. They're begrudgingly here. It's always going to be a 1. Let's just see, is everything else a 4? Or if everything's, then we're probably doing it right. It's the sort of the 3s where you're like, this is that could improve. Now, mate, you are doing a lot of work. It's not only on your programs coaching and upskilling that, but you run the Youth Rugby Coaches Forum, which is absolutely outstanding. I was a guest there last year presenting, and it's awesome, mate. What is the inspiration for you for running this bigger, wider piece in line with your rugby program, but developing rugby coaches throughout Australia with this? What's the rationale, mate?
Yeah. Oh, well, there's a few reasons that kind of have inspired me to create this event. Obviously, like I love rugby. I've been involved in rugby my whole life, been sort of in the youth space for nearly 20 years. And when you get in a role like the privileged role I have at Nudgee, working, at a school that has a big kind of investment in rugby, and it's a sort of a part of our heartbeat, you can see what the potential that rugby can have as a game and the benefits it can have to young people and their families and the wider community. And probably something that has been challenging in recent years is that the game of rugby, particularly in Australia, has probably been struggling a little bit. And there's different reasons for that. And one of them is the safety piece. And something that really triggered me, unfortunately, in the GPS competition, there was a couple of serious injuries. And one of the injuries happened to one of our boys. And it got me really thinking, and it sort of shifted my priority a little bit around, like, in this role, like, it's not all about just making the Nudgee rugby players as good as they can be and helping my coaches and whatever. I sort of started thinking a little bit more broadly about the game of rugby, and are we providing experiences for players in schools and clubs that they're going to be excited about and they're going to keep coming back for, and making sure that the game is safe and the perception of the game is safe, so it continues to grow. So that kind of got me thinking, is there a way that I can, support the game beyond the gates of Nudgee? And then, as you mentioned earlier, back when I was at uni, we were running this music festival. So I did actually pick up a lot of cool pretty transferable skills from running a large scale sort of community event that I could apply to, putting on an event with my event management sort of organizational skills and my passion for rugby and rugby coaching. So that's kind of where the idea was born. And yeah, we've run 4 events. This would be in January will be our 5th event. And like for me, selfishly, like the actual process of putting on the event is a real learning for me. Like obviously having conversations with guys like yourself and the people that I meet on this journey, lots of clever people that have opened my eyes up to so many different components and in different fields of rugby and coaching and young people and culture and, all sorts of things. So I've met lots of really, really intelligent people along the way. And it's been really, really fulfilling.
I found it lovely, mate, because obviously had some super high profile guests last year. Had Joe Schmidt, Mike Cron were there presenting, not only speaking, but also out in the field delivering. And just the access and the sharing that happens in a forum like that. There was hundreds of people. You did outstanding, each with tables. But the bit I loved the most was the interactions that happened all over the show. Like over the whole days, when you're sitting around, you're watching Joe Schmidt, then you're listening to him, then you're having a discussion amongst the other coaches on your table. And when you've got hundreds of coaches eager to learn and share and connect, the learning goes through the roof. I sat down with coaches from all walks of life, and it was just special, I reckon. And I reckon that's the beauty of rugby and the openness and the sharing of the sport. And that's the culture and the values of the sport, which is amazing. And it's a massive reason why this podcast has started as well, to open up and start conversations. It's a wonderful thing you're doing there.
Well, yeah, and that's probably the other point I didn't touch on was just that sharing of ideas. Like, I think there's a few challenges in Australia, mainly geographically. Like, the main hotspots of rugby are in Brisbane and Sydney, and we're so far apart. So I've been in the role at Nudgee for 11 years, and I've had very little to do with schools and clubs in Sydney and rugby directors who face very similar challenges to me in their roles. Like, we should be communicating and sharing ideas and bouncing things off each other. And I feel like that we kind of get really caught up in our own little bubble and just worrying about our own backyard, trying to make our own programs as strong as possible. And we kind of we need to be more open to, sharing our ideas just to make everyone stronger. And I feel like maybe in New Zealand, the vibe I get is probably a little bit more of that culture of sharings around. And I think for me, I presented at this year's forum, and again, that's not my motive for putting on the event so I could present myself, but I kind of felt like I had a few, gold nuggets that I could share, which basically I'd stolen off other people anyway. So they certainly weren't, they're not really my own ideas. I don't claim them as my own, but I feel like if you share something, then other people may start doing that or you're copying you, but that sort of then forces you obviously to continue to evolve. And, you might be saying, oh, this is what we did this year, but I'm sort of thinking, but we're probably moving towards a slightly different model next year, next season. So yeah, definitely that sharing of ideas, I get excited by that, and just meeting people, because again, like, coaching rugby is hard. Like, it is not an easy sport to compare it to other sports. And I'm not going to compare it to other sports, but certainly I know in my world, there's a lot of challenges to coaching rugby. There's a lot of moving pieces. You've got obviously the set piece, scrum, line out, maul, kicking, breakdown. Like, there's a lot of different components. And so there's a lot to consider, and coaches need help. And if we can provide a little bit of support in this world of coaching, and it's not just how to kick, tackle, carry, clean out, it's probably more around the art of coaching that has landed well at these forums.
That's one of my favorite sayings right there, the art of coaching, the art of the craft. And that's what culture is for me. Developing culture, there's an art to it. Like, it's not an exact science. There's many ways to do it. There's no right or wrong way. It's just your way. And that's the true art of coaching, because everything's different. There's ideas, and you got to experiment and be the culture starter on those ideas as a coach, but you got to do it your way. And I think that's massive. Just in reflection to what you said there, like, when I came to that Youth Coaches Forum, which you ran, and you presented, I think you said the 14 best things that
15,
I've done.
15.
The 15 best things you've done as a DOR, as a director of rugby over your 11 years. Mate, I couldn't believe it. I loved it. And I pretty much did the first 7, like, just cut and paste all of those, including buying a massive inflatable for promotional purposes to get our recruitment better. It was that sort of sharing, which is just, when you hear it from someone that's done it, and experience, real life, not just theory, but this is what we did. This is how it worked. This is a couple of mistakes in doing it, but this is the best way forward. Go, fill your boots. And mate, I was impressed. And it's changing the way I'm doing things, because being able to hear from someone with such experience in this space, mate, is absolutely awesome. And I recommend, if anyone, that when they sign up for this forum, which will come out well before January, this thing sells out, I know they can contact you on LinkedIn, but they should also hit you up about what are your 15 pieces of advice for directors of rugby. If you're a director of rugby, get hold of you on LinkedIn, mate, and get onto that, because I couldn't recommend it higher. Now, mate, we've come to that time of the show where it's down to the last question, and I'm interested in this one from you. What's one thing you believe about coaching or culture that you reckon your peers would disagree with?
It's hard because I've tried to surround myself with like-minded people. You talk about, you create this program. It's like, how do you get alignment? Well, you're selective in who you get on board. Look, something that I keep thinking about, like, we've had a lot of success in the Nudgee Rugby program. And Nudgee Rugby's, like, I'm not going to claim that, I've created, this program. I haven't created the program. The program was already created. I'm really fortunate to work alongside, an amazing team, and, we've had some success and continued the success of the program. And I think one thing I've noticed, though, is like the winning part is not everything. Like winning actually can mask some deficiencies. And believe it or not, like we actually need to learn through defeat. Like, I was fortunate to recently coach the Reds under 15 side, and we played the Waratahs 15s, and we just lost the first game. The Waratahs scored right on the buzzer, kicked the conversion, beat us by a point. Now, I strongly believe if we had won that game and they didn't score that last minute try, our performance in the second game wouldn't have been as good, because we put an absolute microscope over our performance to try to find little 1%ers because we didn't get the result. If we had got the result, I reckon there would have been a sense of complacency, and we probably would have gone down to Sydney and not played as well. So that defeat or learning through hardship, like, it is so important. And again, like, I'm not saying you need to manufacture environments where you fail, but you need to embrace that hardship. Like, and in my world, I'm seeing it a lot more with players around selection and players around injuries, and kind of trying to frame that or package that up for these young people that, you need to try to see the positives in this. This is all part of your journey, and you need to embrace the failures and the hardships, because that will 100% will be a moment in time that you'll look back on, and it's pretty rare that you wouldn't agree that was something that made you.
And I like that. I like that a lot. Learn through defeat, embrace the hardships, because, like, I'll just expand on that, because I love this side of things, because the game is essentially a resilience game. You're physically going to get knocked down. That's the point of the game, and get back up again. Like, that is rugby. No matter if you're the best on the field or the worst, that's the reality. You're going to get knocked down. How you go about getting up. And that, for me, that's the learning. And it's not just the physical aspect of that, it's rugby. It's actually the emotional and mental side of it as well. Can you get up and keep going, even though you're down by 50 points and you keep getting knocked down by bigger and better players? Can you just make a switch and go, I'm going to keep going here mentally, knowing that the physical's off the table? And I reckon that's the value of rugby, because outside of this sport, in life, and certainly society is probably getting more Teflon coated, that you don't get these experiences. You don't get these physical knocks. How often, if you're not playing rugby, do you physically get barreled over on the street when you're walking down it? Not very often. And I found some of the most resilient people are rugby players and contact sports people, because the emotional hurt of getting bumped off by someone is repeated over and over again. So it's not an emotional hurt. So you don't react funny. You just go, oh, there's nothing personal there. But when you don't have that regularly, if you get knocked over in the street by someone accidentally, you can get emotionally hurt and get annoyed and pissed off and bitter and want to sue that person because you're not used to it. And I think this is some of the value that rugby has. And I think it's something to be treasured. And what you just talked about, learning through the defeats on this side of things, I think is a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Like, yeah, it's but it's you don't necessarily want to lose, but it's like but it's part of life, isn't it?
It's part of life, mate. And dealing with loss is a reality all humans face. And so the better we get used to it, probably the better we're going to be as communities. Now, Sean Graham, that brings us to the end of the conversation, mate, in the podcast. And I'd just like to wrap up my 3 takeaways I got from you today, if I may. Number 1, I love the opening statement that you said that the coach is responsible for the feel of the team. And I love that because it's a subjective thing. It's hard to put measures on the feel of something. But just that concept around care and connection to make the experience really memorable for the people that are in it is massive. And I think always going back to the coach is the leader. The coach is the head of the waterfall. They're responsible for the feel. And they work through all the other the bits underneath. Number 2, I love that coaching checkpoint you talked about around hearing what your players say. And you framed it around on a Saturday, you take a knee, you get the players to talk about what they're going to do. And that reflects some of the feedback you've been saying throughout the week. And if what you've been saying all week is repeated back to you, you're clearly getting through. And if it's not, it's a big sign to say, however you're delivering, you're probably not getting through as much as you think or would like. And number 3, is feedback and feed forward. I love this because I think we all understand the concept of feedback, where someone does something and you respond, positive or negative. And I love the thought of really emphasizing the positive. But you also talked about feeding it forward, asking the questions, what would happen from here? What is this going to look like in future? And I think that's a really cool thing to test your players on around where they're thinking, not just in what's happening now, but the implications and the consequences of that action now. And I think that's a wonderful coaching point and one we can all do more of because it's often forgotten. Sean Graham, thank you for joining us and your experiences from Nudgee College in Brisbane. What a pleasure to have you on the Coaching Culture podcast.
Nah, it's an absolute privilege. And yeah, what better way to spend a Wednesday morning in Brisbane? So much love, Benny.